I'm Van Sebastian here with my co-host S.A. Baz Collins for this week's Written on the Edge Season 11, Episode 13 interview. We are joined by Vincent Traughber Meis to discuss his novel, Iguana. So if you don't know our guest, allow me to introduce him. Vincent Traughber Meis is a fiction writer, a world traveler, and a former ESL community college teacher. When he's not traveling, he divides his time between writing and working in the garden. Most of the characters in his novels and short stories come from across the LGBTQ plus spectrum and are racially and ethnically diverse. He has published 10 novels: Eddie's Desert Rose, Tio Jorge, Down in Cuba, Deluge, Four Calling Birds, The Mayor of Oak Street, Firstborn Sons, Colton's Terrible Wonderful Year, The Long Journey to You, and Iguana. Tio Jorge and Down in Cuba and Deluge have all won Rainbow Awards. The Mayor of Oak Street and Firstborn Sons have won Reviewers' Choice Awards, and his short stories have appeared in several collections, both in print and online, and have reached finalist status in several short story contests. A collection of short stories, Far From Home, was published in October 2021. He lives with his husband in San Leandro, California, and Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Vincent, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
That is quite the list of achievements. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, ESL teacher, which is near and dear to my heart. My college degree is in linguistics, and I actually did a stint working in an ESL department right out of college. So I'm there with you. But there's a far cry from working with students to separating yourself into a quiet room and putting words to paper. Where did that passion come from, that passion to write?
It's something that's been going on for most of my life. I remember back in high school, I entered this short story contest for a local newspaper, and I won the contest. So that was the first time I had the feeling that I guess I can write. And then from there, it was like poetry and unfinished novels and short stories, and uh, nothing got published until many years later. Yeah.
Nice, nice. And then that first book came out in the world, and you had to face the fact that you were a writer now.
Yeah. Well, my first byline was actually an article for The Advocate. I spent a year in Saudi Arabia. And I wrote about an experience, a gay experience in Saudi Arabia, and The Advocate published it. So that was actually the first time I saw my byline, and that was quite exciting.
That's very exciting. That's a huge accomplishment. I remember reading The Advocate. I know what that means.
Hmm.
So we're here today to talk about Iguana,
Yes,
which published in English and Spanish, right?
right.
What should folks know about it? Like, if I were to see you at a book fair or a signing event and I saw that beautiful cover and was like, what's this about? What would you tell me?
Uh, it is about an American who goes to live in Mexico, in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and he's kind of very dissatisfied with his life in the States, and he wants a new beginning. And he's not specifically looking for love, but love happens and shit happens. So he has to deal with both in this new culture.
Nice. So, real slice of life.
Yes.
Wh- How much of the novel is inspired by your own travels and obviously living there?
Uh, well, a lot of it. I mean, the atmosphere of Puerto Vallarta, I hope comes across because I lived it, I live it, and but it's not autobiographical. I mean, the relationship that happens is nothing like my life.
Mhm.
But I do use incidents that have happened to me in Puerto Vallarta to uh, enhance the story.
Is Puerto Vallarta essentially a character or is it really just a setting?
I think it's really a character from what critics say
Hmm.
of the book. I tried to put a lot of the atmosphere in there, the beach, the weather, the living on the edge of the jungle, um, the gay life. So I would say, yes, it is a character.
Awesome. I'm going to hop over to talking about translations for a moment because you've obviously worked very diligently to make sure your books are available in multiple languages. Has the reception in non-English speaking cultures been different and felt more important?
Uh, Actually, I don't know yet because the Spanish version just came out
Okay.
and I haven't had much chance to do promotion. I do have a lot of friends in Puerto Vallarta who Spanish speaking friends who said their skills of reading English are not very good, so they were looking forward to a Spanish translation.
Hmm.
So it has just really come on the market. So as far as sales and um, my a few Spanish speaker friends have read it and they really enjoyed it. So
Okay. All right.
we'll see.
All right.
It's also interesting being Mexican. It's also interesting, I think, because when you do a translation, you kind of have to ride the center line on the language because a lot of places have idioms and sayings that they say or how they say, like good morning, even good morning, and how are you? They will have different ways of doing it. So you almost have to. It's almost like in English when we had back in the 30s and 40s the Atlantic way of talking because you didn't want to really slap on a dialect or an what's the word I'm looking for, a accent on the English that was being spoken, so they developed that Atlantic way of speaking. And yet, when you're doing it on paper, you have to really kind of figure out where's that line that I can ride that all Spanish speakers will really kind of get the gist of what you're trying to put down, don't you think?
Absolutely. The translation was difficult because I wanted to definitely to have the atmosphere of Mexico and
Hmm.
the love interest of the protagonist is Mexican. So when he's speaking, like in the dialogue, I tried to make sure that he used Mexican expressions. But um, also the publisher is in Spain. So the person who is doing the editing on the translation, I had to make sure that they didn't try to put in expressions that are mainly used in Spain. My two translators, one was Mexican and one was Puerto Rican. So tried to get, some influence from both very different
Yes,
Spanish
yes,
speakers.
yes.
Oh yeah.
And the thing is,
And
I think the thing, and I just want to jump in here real quick. I think the thing is also, you know, I do reactions to our queer media with another gay author that's down in Mexico, but he is Mexican born. He lives in Mexico. He's in Puebla, and even my Mexican experience north of the border and his in the country of Mexico are drastically different. So you also have that layer of Mexicans or Latinos living in other parts of the world that won't have those experiences that even Mexicans in Mexico experience.
that was also another.
Uh-huh.
My Mexican translator lives in the United States and he's there quite a while. And sometimes I he he wasn't familiar with some of the expressions that I'm using, like in the dialogue of
Mm-hmm.
the Mexican characters. And so even as a Mexican American, he's not really up to date on the
Yeah.
current way
Yeah.
that Spanish is spoken in Mexico.
Yeah.
Hmm. I mean, that just reminds me of the episode in Netflix's One Day at a Time, where
Mm.
the Cubans, the Colombians, the Mexicans, and the Puerto Ricans are all complaining that none of them spoke Spanish properly,
Yeah.
which was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so you said a lot of books in foreign countries. Are they mostly ones that you have traveled to personally? Or do you
Yes.
sort of do you sort of dream travel? Like pick one that you haven't been to yet, and like, all right, I'm gonna put a book there and then I'm gonna go.
No, I wouldn't do that. Um, yeah, for example, my book down in Cuba. was a result of having traveled there a number of times and being very interested in the culture. Um, so every setting for my foreign setting for my books I've visited, yeah, or lived there.
I love that. Primarily Spanish-speaking countries. I know you've been to Saudi Arabia.
Primarily Spanish-speaking countries, but yes, my first novel, Eddie's Desert Rose, is set in Saudi Arabia, and I did a contract there as an English teacher.
Okay, okay. Do you have any other countries in your list?
Uh, well, I lived in Spain for 5 years.
Okay.
Um, but if you mean, do you mean
For your
non-Span?
settings for your books.
Uh, well, uh, there's also scenes from other countries, like in The Long Journey to You. There's a chapter or two set in Colombia.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Can we talk about your diverse cast?
Yes.
So, if I remember your longer bio, because I've read both your bios, you're from the Midwest, Illinois, right?
Yes.
How do you make sure that when you're delving into the diversity of either something in the LGBTQ plus spectrum or in the Spanish speaking spectrum, you're doing it in a way that heightens the culture instead of just sort of shines bright spotlights on it?
That's a difficult question because I've I've gotten some feedback about, as a white cisgender male, I should stay in my own lane. I've also written a number of Black characters. So, but I feel like I write about the people I'm surrounded by.
Mhm.
And I have lots of Latino Spanish-speaking friends. Uh, I'm married to a Black man, and I'm, part of his family. Uh, and I of course, try to respect the cultural differences in my writing, and I feel like I've been reasonably successful in doing that.
Mhm.
Um, I don't. It's not my job to interpret the cultural differences,
Right.
but only to write them as I see them.
Right, right. Well, I mean, if we only wrote what we were, our books would be terribly boring.
I also have a trans male character who appears in several of my novels, and that involved a lot of research and talking to people, and it's kind of scary to do that, but yeah, I don't want to write about old white people that.
Well, and on that top, I mean, it is so important that we give our trans siblings space to be in our 100% important.
uh,
And like you've approached it, we need to do it, kindly, fairly, but also give them space.
Absolutely.
And the thing is, they can be, hello, Caitlyn Jenner, they can be problematic too. So you can, that this is, I think, the fear that comes from it. If we're of the queer community, we know enough to know when we are treading into territory that may not be received well because we are so uber vigilant about our surroundings at all times. So, which is also one of my main complaints about straight women writing about us because they don't live with that level of vigilance that you walk around with all the time. You don't get to put it down like they do when they go back to their straight counterparts. We have to live it all the time. And so the issue becomes that that's a layer in the story that they write about, and okay, that's fine. But if the critique comes, you need to understand it. But I think as queer people, we see each other enough that we can include them in our stories so that they have representation. But I think one of the things we need to take an extra step forward is, they can also be villainous to some degree. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be, the perfect trans character. Like I said, Caitlyn Jenner is a good example of someone who does a lot of detriment to the queer community. So
Yes.
that's the thing that I think that as queer people we're very sensitive to, because we know of what we live. And so I think that we include those things. And it's like I put a Down syndrome character in my story, but I did it with, I made her actually one of the most intelligent, observant children in the entire planet, because the way that she saw the world, she just realized so many normies do make really stupid decisions, and she caught on to that. And but so my position of writing about, now I don't have any Down syndrome people in my life. I don't, but I've observed enough. I've watched enough. They had the one on Glee. I observed how they behaved, that I knew I could capture her in a way that I wanted. That she was a child. She's playful. She has all of the things that children do, and all children by and large have that no filter. They see exactly what's going on, kind of thing. So I think when you include a trans character, getting back to your book, when you include that kind of people in it, they want to be recognized. I remember we had a lady who followed us on our podcast, and she has a disability, and she said, I would like to see more disabled people in stories, because we're just not there. And I think that when you hear something like that from a marginalized community, I feel it's almost incumbent on us as authors to tread into those waters. We can do it respectfully, we can do it with our due diligence, but we should include them because they are there. Don't you think?
I totally agree. Yeah.
So, because of you mentioned that your trans character was in multiple books, are your books linked?
Oh, good
A
question.
few of them are. Yeah. I wrote a novel called Four Calling Birds. Birds, Burt, because it's the last name of the four siblings. And the oldest sibling uh, transitions to a man. And I, up to that point, I had only written standalone novels
Hmm.
and was not interested in doing sequels. But a couple of people who read that novel felt like they wanted to know more about these siblings. And so I considered the idea, and I decided to write a sequel to that, Firstborn Sons. And in Firstborn Sons, well, in Four Calling Birds, the trans character is just beginning to psychologically accept that he is going to transition. But it actually happens in Firstborn Sons. And the other siblings also go through various, not different kinds of transitions in their lives. So, and then there was, I decided I wanted to write a young adult novel. So I took this perspective of the son of the gay couple in Four Calling Birds and Firstborn Sons, and told the story, basically the same story, but from a young adult perspective. And that's Colton's Terrible Wonderful Year.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, in the interest of time, I will ask this next question sort of open-ended. Is there anything about Iguana or any of your works that you want folks to know that we didn't think to ask?
Uh, Maybe something about the romantic aspect of the story, because this is Iguana is the most romantic novel that I've written, and I still don't feel it's like uh, romance genre, big R romance, but the focus is more on the romantic relationship between the two men.
Right. So you didn't follow the formula that all romance novels follow in order to fit into the
Oh,
genre.
heterosexual romance novels follow.
Fair. But you told one of our romance stories, which are sometimes messy, sometimes very real, and usually incredibly important because we never believed they could actually happen, and then they do.
Uh, yes, and I had some of the reviewers for Iguana. I have to say, generally women didn't like the fact that it was a messy relationship, and that there was a lot of back and forth, and like, are they or aren't they going to be together? And they wanted, I guess, a more generic romance
Yeah,
story.
yeah,
Yeah.
they want easy read romance. That's what they're looking for. And that's where I think the gays and the straight women hit the ground on, what proper representation is. And from a gay male perspective, I think that's one of the things that's lacking. But when they run into it from us, oh no, that's too much, and that's where I think we get the going against the grain kind of thing. So yeah, and heated rivalry is pointing that out. So that's all I'll say to that.
Well, I want to thank you for telling your romance your way.
Yes, absolutely. Love that.
All right. Are you ready for our get to know you questions?
Sure.
Take it away, Bess.
Okay, before we get to that, just one quick note. Do like, subscribe, do all the things, comment down below, be respectful, be mindful. I'm looking at some of you commenters out there. Be respectful, be mindful, and know that you're in the queer house. So operate, if you're not a part of the community, operate as if you are a guest in someone else's home. So always take that track. All right, going on from there, what book, film, or piece of art has had the biggest influence on your writing style?
Uh, so there was a period of time I was reading a lot of Aldous Huxley, and I read his last novel, Island, and I loved how he brings politics and social issues into his novels. And the fact that it was interesting how uh, Island was kind of the antithesis of his most well-known Brave New World novel, and that it's kind of a utopian novel. And then I found out that we shared the same birthday, not the same year, but July 26th birthday. Also, Mick Jagger was born on the same birthday. But a little anecdote, if you don't mind. Uh, I Through a friend, I happened to meet his second wife, Laura Artera Huxley, and we sort of became friends for a little while.
Oh,
And
love that.
she lived in LA, uh, and I got to visit her in the house where she and Aldous lived, and the house where he died. And on the day of his death, he was dying of cancer. She gave him an injection of LSD because he wanted to heighten his experience of going to the other side. So I got to visit her in that house in
Wow.
LA.
Wow, absolutely amazing. What fictional or historical character would you invite to march with you at a pride parade?
Um, Ian Forster came to mind
Ah, excellent choice.
because I felt it was so sad
Yeah.
that his novel Morris was posthumously published, and that he couldn't be totally open in
Even though
his life.
it was an open secret within literary circles. That's the other
Yeah.
weird thing about it, that they all knew, you know.
Well, it's a lot of like a lot of actors like
Yeah,
Rock
yeah,
Hudson in
yeah.
Hollywood. Uh, but I think, yeah, it would be great to walk with him in the Pride Parade and just like he could uh,
Experience
be
queer
his
joy.
true self. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Excellent choice. Uh, okay, if you or your protagonist had to survive a gay bar karaoke night, what song would you or they belt out?
Uh, well, what came to mind is a Mexican classic, Piel Canela, uh, which because Dawson, the protagonist in Iguana, is kind of obsessed with this his Mexican boyfriend and this whole exotic uh, for him relationship. Uh, and so the song is Ojos Negros, Piel Canela,
It's one of my favorite songs.
black eye.
Yeah, I love
And
Eating Gourmet's
it's
translation of it. Yeah, that's one of my
especially
favorite.
Eating Gourmet's
Yeah,
version. I
it's
love that.
great.
Yeah.
I'll play a little bit under what we're saying.
So and of course, he's trying to integrate into Mexican culture, even though he knows he'll never be Mexican. But just to sing a song in Spanish for him would have a lot of meaning.
Yes, it's an excellent song. I'm glad you chose it. All right. What's a place, real or imagined, that feels like home to you and why?
Well, I think this one is kind of obvious for me is Puerto Vallarta. Um, yes, it's a very touristy town, but it's also kind of a magical place. And because of its location between the sea and the jungle, and
All of the
I,
expats that are there, all of the tourists that fly through, it's very cosmopolitan. Yeah.
yeah, and but it's also very Mexican. I mean,
Oh,
they
yeah.
have
Yeah.
all the Mexican holidays, and like particularly the 12 days of the I think it's the Virgin Guadalupe, where they have parades through the town every day and to the church. And so I think it's a very interesting mix
Hmm.
of, foreigners and the local Mexican population. So,
Excellent. I love that. I love that so much. Okay. What's the strangest or most unexpected place you've ever found inspiration for in a work of yours?
uh, so I forgot to mention earlier, we were talking about foreign locations and foreign settings for books or stories, and I forgot Turkey. Uh, so I saw this documentary about Turkish oiled wrestling that takes place in Edirne, Turkey. So I said, I have to go there. So I actually went twice, and it's extremely homoerotic uh, wrestling competition, but it's also very culturally significant for Turkey, and particularly this small town where there's a whole ritual involved. It's not just wrestling. There's a ritual. Um, so I wrote a short story about that. I also wrote another article that came out in a magazine that no longer exists called Out of This World. No, Out of the World. Uh, I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact title of the magazine, but I wrote an article for that. So that was uh, an inspiring place to visit, and just that to set yourself in a totally different culture.
Okay, excellent. Well, which themes or motifs do you find yourself returning to again and again in your work?
I think the answer to this is also obvious. The experience of an American man going to other cultures and putting himself in a homosexual experience in that culture, and the way that he reacts and the person from the local culture reacts. So that's something I find really fascinating, and that reflects my life
Stranger
as
in a strange
well.
land kind of thing.
Exactly. I was going to
Yes.
say that.
Yes. Excellent. Okay. Finally, what's a piece of LGBTQ plus culture, music, film, art, or history that never fails to inspire you?
Let's see. I wrote some notes about that, and I can't. So one of my favorite films is Almodovar's Law of Desire,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's one of his most gay films, I guess you could say, queer films.
Mm-hmm.
And it's particularly topical now because there's a trans character in that movie. And this was like, I think it was the late 80s that it came out. And his Almodovar's ability to not only present queer characters, but trans characters. And plus, I love that movie. I could watch it over and over again. And uh, it's it's kind of messy. It's very messy, and but poignant at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's one of
Well,
my
I think
favorite
that's an excellent choice. It's a great film.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we're always here for a Moldovar. All right. Well, you made it through our list. Bravo.
films.
So, Vincent, what are you working on next?
Back to the sequel question, I went from never writing sequels to now writing sequels. And I'm working on a sequel to Iguana because it ends on a happily for now note.
Mm-hmm.
But there's obviously a lot more to their story, Dawson and Yvonne. Um, yeah, I'm about halfway through a sequel.
That's awesome. Where is the best place for people to follow you and keep up with updates so that they're ready for that sequel?
Well, I had a website, vincentmeis.com. Uh, I'm also fairly active on Facebook, have my personal page and then my author page, Instagram as well.
Okay. And we will have all those links on your show page and with this episode.
Great.
Do you have any final words of wisdom for folks?
Uh, people are always asking me like, "Oh, I have this novel I'm thinking about, how do you do it? How do you, and it's not words of wisdom, but just there's only one way to do it is do it. You
Yeah,
sit down,
exactly.
put in the hours because it's going to take more hours than you can possibly imagine.
Uh-huh.
But there
Have your
you
best beverage. Be ready because you're going to be in that chair for a while.
Well, it's like that old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
That's a perfect image.
Awesome. Well, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to Vincent Traughber Meis for joining us. Vincent, thank you so much, and thank you for your flexibility today.
Oh, great. It was a lot of fun, actually, and I enjoyed meeting you guys.
Well, when you've got that sequel ready, book another date with us. We want to hear how the boys come out.
Okay.
So definitely come back.
Yeah. All right, folks, we at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. If you enjoy learning about new artists or hearing our thoughts on entertainment media, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. Our show was produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.roguepodcast.com. Tune in next week for your queer media fix.
Bye-bye now.
What's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.